Welcome to the 27th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott Beck. And Scott, finally it has arrived. We get to have our levels conversation. And how many times do we talk about levels in wrestling? And my formula for levels is 0 to 100. And 0 would be first day of practice, you've never seen wrestling before, you're absolutely terrible, all the way up to 100, which is absolute master class, which is such rarefied air that you're almost reluctant to give it, but there's some few special people that have that. And then you have everything in between. I'd say the 90s are elite level, you're world class. I saw some junior high wrestling this past season that was probably a level 3. They don't understand hip awareness. They can't sprawl. They get into ridiculous situations. They might not even be a level 3 because they understand it so more. And they might even be negatives if that's possible, just because they don't understand anything. But if we're talking levels, I think for the United States women, there's only two 100 class, maybe 3 or 4, but 2 for sure, in my view. And that's Helen Maroulis and Amit Elor. It's because they established a level of dominance over the course of time. And if you take Helen Maroulis, she won it in 2015. 2016, she knocks off the GOAT Yoshida, wins the Olympic gold medal, the first in U.S. history. And then in 2017, has this unbelievable, brilliant run, doesn't get scored upon, doesn't surrender a point. I think Helen Maroulis was our country's first 100. What do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, beating Yoshida, 13-time world champ, 3-time Olympic champ. And then yeah, I agree, 17 was a master class in wrestling at the Paris World Championships. I was there and it was pretty cool to watch. So yeah, I'd say she's the first 100. I mean, 100 is rarefied air. Like we could even argue, like, Helen's won 3 Olympic medals. Like, is a meet 100? I mean, based on what she's done, she's even ahead of pace of Helen or anybody in U.S. history. But then you say she's, quote, only won one Olympic medal. Like, by definition, can you be 100 with one Olympic medal? Or do you have, Helen's got 3. She's got a couple world championships. Helen had only 3 and 3 silvers, but how much time do you need to be 100? Like, she's 100, but is it enough time to classify? I don't know, but those are would be clearly the two, but it's rarefied air. If in fact Ami even has passed the test of time for the 100.
And for me, I guess the way I look at it is just you've seen an established domination by a meet that she's unquestionably the best in the world in her weight range. She won 2 world titles at 72 kilograms, then moved down to 68 and beat a solid field there. I just feel like there's no question about it. She is the class of the field, just like a John Smith or a David Taylor or Jordan Burroughs. And I think it's a moving scale too. I mean, Helen of 2017 isn't the same as Helen of 2024, and that's just going to
Right.
happen when you age and you get a little bit older. I mean, same with Jordan Burroughs. When he was in 2011, 12, 13, and he was dominating, he wasn't the same as when he was in his
So
30s.
so then the question becomes: is it the 100? Is the ranking a current present wrestler ranking, or a lifetime achievement award, or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think in the moment you can only evaluate what's happening, and then when you look back on a person's career in its totality, say when they retire and they're officially done, then you can look at the brilliance and say, yes, this person achieved this status. So maybe it's kind of a combination of both.
Okay.
But I think what you're looking at right now with some of these college programs is you have the University of Iowa has 390 level, elite level wrestlers in their program. And
Absolutely.
Lacey Kilty, Kennedy Blades, and Kylie Welker. Where they are on that scale it is up for debate. But to move up one level, Scott, is incredibly difficult.
Well, we always talk. First of all, I would say, as a random aside, our 1 to 100 scale will be better and more accurate than the USA Wrestling pin rankings, because those are way off. If anybody knows anything about wrestling and actually looks at it, it's perplexing where they're not adjusted for age level and whatever. So we'll be better than that if we do it. But the levels, yeah. I mean, it's hard once you start clumping. Like there's levels, like you're saying, like very elite, and then you have the level, you know, very, very good senior, and then so but there are jumps. There are definitely like quantum jumps between clumps in the level. Like we could debate, where Kilty should be versus Welker or this and that, but they're still in that top tier, and then you say, but to jump from like great high school wrestler to good senior wrestler is a massive jump, unless somebody's just way, like a, pseudo prodigy or not, or just exceptionally good, like a, Lidecker or, Tana Fernandez is going to, jump from junior high school to, senior in the kind of clumpings. But, it is an interesting exercise for sure.
You have Audrey Jimenez, as David Pastries wanted to correct me, is that you have someone who just got done wrestling last season, probably a 98, 99 level in Sarah Hildebrandt, and now she's leveled up and she's better than she was last season. And so whereas Audrey Jimenez on the sliding scale, because she continues to get better. So it does move up, but it does take an insane amount of work just to go from a 93 to a 94.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, yeah, I think Sarah's kind of, if we could just go back to Sarah. So let's say we made Sarah like a 98. I mean, she's an Olympic champ, so she's got to be somewhere in the 97, 98, 99-ish, okay? Then Jimenez, I would put probably at like 91 or something, exceptionally talented, yet to quote, really do anything on the senior level, but, 3 or 4 age group world medals. So she's a young athlete but she could easily, not easily, it's exceptionally difficult. I'll correct that. But if she stays to form and keeps improving and now starts making senior teams, I mean, she'll jump to the low to mid 90s pretty quickly, I would think.
And then where do you put a Kylie Welker who just dominated through the US Open and was beating 90 level opponents? And Yelena McCoy, it is clearly in the 90s. She's elite level. She's shown it time and time again that she's at that class. I just think she needs some of those high level results consistently. And if she wins a world title, that's just going to elevate her even more.
Yeah, I mean, she got world medal already, and she's, had to wrestle pretty tough people to try to make teams in the past. Um, she's probably a 94, 95. I don't know, 93, 95, something like that. If I had to guess, I mean, where would you make her?
Right in there, probably mid 90s at this point.
But she could easily become in a year or two. She's a 97 or 8, though. She, wins a world title. I mean, but she's, we're talking about, world medalists that, have been around for a while, even though they're very young. She's very young, but she's just about to break out too. That's a scary thing about Welker, is if she stays healthy, she's just about to start dismantling people, in my opinion.
And to put this in context, when you have three 90s on the Iowa team, a good college wrestler is probably in the 70s. Sage Mortimer is probably in the
80s.
mid to upper 80s and
Yeah.
pushing that envelope.
But she's one of the best ones, right? So yeah, so she's probably an 88 to a 90. In our guessing, we're making this up on the fly here, by the way. So this is literally we're figuring this out as we're talking. We've had a preliminary discussion about this maybe a month ago or two. Yeah, I mean, yeah, good college wrestlers probably in the high 70s to low 80s. A good to above average.
And then when you are in high school to make those jumps and to continue to move up the scale, I just think you have to be realistic sometimes with where you are. That I think that's what you've talked about is that when you get these high level competitions and you get your cage rattled, you discover where you are and how you need to get to a different level, whether it's mentality, whether it's gut wrench defense, parterre defense, whether it's a position that you've never seen before, then you understand, all right, there's the higher level. That's what I want to get to. Now I have to go back to here and figure some things out.
Yeah, and it's also just because if you have a weakness, in many cases the solution is not necessarily simple. If you don't have good parterre defense, and you're wrestling some, Europeans who are exceptionally good in parterre, or Japan with very good laces and stuff. You have to then really work on it because the second weakness is exploited in this age of like scouting and film, and then all of a sudden a weakness gets exposed, everybody's going to go after that weakness until you fix it. And fixing it isn't just as simple as acknowledging the weakness. You have to drill it a lot and then feel comfortable enough to do it in competition. And then, everybody's going to go after it. So it takes time, but it's a constant process. I mean, you can see, when we talk about levels, and I don't care how accoladed somebody is at high school or whatever, or even in college, winning national titles, until you really watch them wrestle, you can see the levels. If you know what you're looking for, you really can see people's weaknesses, whether it's not transitioning on finishing high percentage, making mistakes in the way you finish. They may win matches, but getting away with mistakes that you won't get away with at the higher level. So it's, I mean, you and I talk about it. We watch this stuff, and the levels are kind of obvious. When somebody's in a different tier,
And it's fun to see when you watch someone reach another level where you've watched them consistently and then you say, this person is growing on that scale and they're getting
Absolutely.
better. That's fun to see, whether it's one or two levels, but it's fun to watch a quality wrestler get even better.
Yeah, I'll give it a good example of somebody who, started young. I think won a cadet world title. I think like in Cristel Rodriguez, but I'd watch her wrestle and I just would watch her get better. And I'm not just saying because she's the accolades now. We were talking about her. I talked about her getting better a couple of years ago, where she kind of had a little period where she kind of disappeared. The results weren't as good, and then you could just see her get better. And then as she started to get better, she got more confident, and then she's just the way she finishes, her technical ability, her mat awareness. Like she has kept on improving. And I've seen that level jump just as I've watched her progress.
And then one thing I know for sure is that when someone who is at a high level and was beating on someone that was at a lower level in practice, when that higher level person retires and they actually go back and wrestle that lower level person, the lower level person who gained levels loves to take it out on the retired wrestler.
Yeah, well, somebody's levels above you. It's kind of really not fun when you wrestle the same person for years and you scored 0 points. So if you ultimately keep doing it and then they're battling father time and they may retire and then they go back thinking they could just throw you around. Yeah, and if you ever have either lived through it personally, whether you're the recipient or the giver, or you've watched it, once the person was worse realizes that they're actually better now, it's pretty fun to watch. And then the other person can never beat them again for the most part.
If we are permitted to apply the levels conversation to the upcoming Pan American Championships, I think we can, because I think the level of the Pan Am Championships has improved. And what was once a tournament that I would glance at casually is now one that I'm completely invested in. I'm excited about the Pan American Championships, the team we're going to send, and who the Pan Am countries are going to send. We've talked about some of the good wrestlers and how they've leveled up. And you mentioned how a lot of these Pan American countries really value this as kind of a benchmark of where they are against the United States and Canada. I think this weekend should be fun, and I think we have a team that is mixed in their levels, but I think that we can do well.
Yeah, well, we will do well. It's just about how well and like you said, who goes. I glanced at the Canada team; looks fairly solid too. Some pretty good athletes with accolades. Our team is very mixed, so it's going to be really interesting. We have some absolute animals, world's and Olympic medalists, and then we have some, U.S. national champ kind of final X wrestlers who are former world team members who are very good, and then we have some younger wrestlers that have really not competed at this level. You've seen that, like if somebody read through the preview, so it will be interesting to see how we do. I maintain that the timing of this tournament or the timing of the U.S. Open and a World Team Trials, there could not be a worse time, right? Like this is sandwiched between World Team Trials and U.S. Open. So you either have people that finish kind of out. Maybe the top two don't want to go if they're battling out. But if somebody's sitting in Final X, maybe they want to go if they're healthy. And that's what we've seen, with like Macy and, Blades. And then you have like the, Martinez and Nettie who won, who are going to go. But then it's just so I don't know, man. I don't like the way we time our trials around this tournament in particular. It's always a crunch where, it's like we're begging people to go to the Pan Ams. In this case, with people sitting in Final X that can go, but I'd like to see us have her open earlier in the whole or do something different around this.
Of the 10 weight classes for the United States, I'm interested to see how Amanda Martinez does because these opportunities are rare. She's one of those fighters who just sticks with it and continues to put herself into the mix. And now she's in Final X against Helen Maroulis. Of course, you have to favor Helen Maroulis at this point just based on her accolades. We don't know where she is. She hasn't wrestled since the Olympic Games. But I just hope she takes advantage of this opportunity and really understands these things don't just happen. You have to earn these.
Yeah, I mean, there's some tough people. I don't know who the other countries are sending. I haven't looked at the list yet. Ecuador has good 57. Mexico has had some. Canada can. Cuba. I don't know who's being sent, but Amanda Martinez is an absolute fighter and a scrapper, and she's kept improving over time. So I would expect her to perform very well. What that exactly means, could she win it? Absolutely. Could she just, I don't know, but I'd expect a good performance from her.
But we are in absolute senior level crunch time right now because you have the Pan Ams. Following week, you have the World Team Trials. And then a couple weeks later, you're going to have the Final X to determine our world team. So we really are in the midst of it. And if we look ahead to the World Team Trials, a few entries coming in. Nothing surprising on who is there, but it's a different tournament than the US Open because that first match out of the chute is going to be a high level match against whoever you have.
Absolutely. It'll be a smaller bracket. I mean, what I've seen over the years, and I've been following this tournament for a while because we've wrestled a bunch of times. Everybody that qualifies does not go. I'd say the ratio is normally about 60 to 70% of the people, at most, actually, probably. So you tend not to see as many entries as you think. So everybody's pretty good. And just to qualify, you had to be top seven in the U.S. Open, among other, the highest Bill Farrell finisher, highest in college. So um, everybody's pretty good. There's no horrible people. I shouldn't have used the word. There's not lesser, accolade. Everybody's pretty good this term. You got to be ready to go right away. They are doing it over 2 days, so it's going to have the same format. Um, but yeah, it's going to be very difficult, and the stakes are it's winner, winner, you're done. So it's all in kind of situation, and people are going to be scrapping. And the entry list right now is very light. There's probably three or four per weight at most. So we really can't intelligently go through it until we really see how it plays out. So I'm sure next week we will do a much deeper dive when we see the entries.
On the college front, there are high school girls that are making their final commitments, and we're getting into that season where it's really filling up, especially for those ranked seniors. Interesting that there's been some ranked seniors and quality wrestlers going to Oklahoma State and their club program. They are not a D1 program yet, but there's indications, and Gigi Bragg just said this, that she has expectations that Oklahoma State will be a Division I women's wrestling program sometime in the next 2 years.
The minimum, it could be 1 year until like starting maybe next year for like a sanctioned Division I program, but most likely it's going to be 2 years, which would probably be the max. And but we still will be traveling as a team, having some duels. Like they're gonna start before their men's duel, they'll have a women's duel, and the way they're gonna sell their tickets is like it comes in a package deal. So that will really bring the cowboy wrestling fans to the women's, and that's going to be really cool to build a program and a fan base and people who support. And their school really just comes behind all their sports, and even people in Oklahoma, they love their sports. So that's cool. But yeah, competition, we're going to be going to opens and trying to get some duels in, but also competing at world team trials and trying to make world teams and senior level stuff. And that's my ultimate goal, is to be on the senior level and to be making world teams, Olympic teams someday. So that's what I want. And I wanted to find a program. Yes, I do want to wrestle in college, but I wanted to find a program.
There's a feeling that this might happen. And I don't know why, because I'm usually so skeptical about this, thinking that it takes so much, and I'm still in that frame of mind that it's going to be a long way off. But it just seems like there's some indicators that we might be moving in that direction, and that is the absolute best thing that could happen. If Lehigh gets one, hopefully Tarleton State gets one, maybe Columbia. Now we're cooking again. Now we have some teams that can get in there, and then it's not just Iowa just having all of the resources that can run over people with all the bells and whistles that they have. Now we can actually get a competitive balance with some D1 programs. I can't wait for that to happen, and I hope Oklahoma State adds.
I think it would be great if Oklahoma State did. I mean, there's a lot of, local high school talent, and then there's just the allure of the history and the, legacy. So and that's the thing with Iowa. I mean, it's not just, oh, it's the University of Iowa, it's Iowa, and that's like if you have Oklahoma State, I mean, and then if, we got Lehigh, I mean, then you say the big one, and I'd love to see, and it should, there's such a hotbed of talent. Like we were talking last thing, just what the talent in the Valiant room is, for women's wrestling, who's in that room in the pipeline. So if you could think of, God willing, like Arizona State, at some point, and then just we keep this march, maybe in Missouri or something. I don't know, but like as you get, I do think it's it gets a little easier because the athletic directors see what's out there and they see the competitive pressure, and then the student athletes can say, why not us? So I mean, the first step, like in Oklahoma State thing, it's good they have that club, just like Lehigh did, because we're seeing that these clubs are where, in Columbia, and you're seeing that it starts the pressure, I think, a little bit.
Hopefully pressure to the point where if you're Lehigh, if you're Oklahoma State, you get this talent, it would almost be a crime if you did not utilize it and just kept them in the club. So I love that pressure that you're getting quality girls, because Lehigh is another recognizable name that is known for wrestling. Jerry Lehman said at Lehigh, wrestling isn't a sport, it's a religion. So that tells you how important it is on that campus. So the more we can get those type of programs, Lehigh, Penn State, Oklahoma State, Iowa, those come to mind for me as programs that are identified with wrestling. If we just got Oklahoma State, Lehigh, that's a great start.
Absolutely. I think it would be phenomenal. I mean, and then I don't know, what the situation is, if there's been, where Penn State is on this at all. So, but that would be the next, logical one. And then another school, like one would think should be moving in this direction, we haven't really talked about. And I know, but like, why on earth, if you have Iowa and then Oklahoma, like, why wouldn't University of Michigan start a women's wrestling team? There's a good high school wrestling in Michigan, the states around it, and it's a good academic school. They have a great, the Cliff Keen Wrestling Club. I would think, Cliff Keen would want to support that as well. Speaking out of turn, but, they were always supportive with Beat the Streets, with the Gotham City Open that we did, which was a great high school tournament. And younger, we'd have, Cliff Keen help sponsor that. So I would think that there would be some, potential synergy there.
And with Grand Valley State adding it, of course, it's a D2 program. You can just look right down the road and say they're having success. Maybe we can too. Now, I have no idea if they're thinking this way at all. Maybe it's the furthest thing from their radar, but we like to get excited and start thinking down the road of what could happen.
Yeah. I mean, and then of course, if all of a sudden, or Ohio State, I mean, it just seems like there's, hopefully that when the momentum starts, the ball can, start rolling down the hill.
But I think if we got Lehigh and Tarleton State, which are the two that we know are considering it or on that cusp of making that happen, and then if we start getting indication that Oklahoma State might, and they're actually moving that direction, those are some big players.
And Columbia.
So now you just start seeing some groundwork being built, and then you start looking at it and say, these have it, and then maybe that more people will be willing to want to add programs.
For sure. So we'll just have to see how it plays out, but certainly some of these rumblings are good things to hear.
As we have talked about, we do not know the current state of the NCAA championships, what that will look like, but a key piece for McKendree University is they got Sakamoto, U23 world champion from Japan, transferred from Northern Michigan to McKendree University. So in those lightweights, Alexia Garcia has really gone to work getting Heather Kroll, Katie Valdez, already has Gabby Tedesco. Now you have Yu Sakamoto. That's looking good in that top three weight classes or bottom three weight classes for McKendree University.
You can't tell me having Yu Sakamoto in the room is not going to be good for Shelby Moore and vice versa. I mean, it's just another really high level athlete. So I think, iron sharpens iron, and Alexia is doing a really good job on the recruiting front. And as we talked about in a different show where he's like, judge me now. These are my people. So let's see how they do. And it seems like they have a really good room.
We'll end with this. Ultimate Club Duels just took place, a high school tournament. You saw Taina Fernandez, Julia Horger. They had a powerhouse team called the Misfit Kisses. And if you look at what they had, there were just a ton of big names throughout the country, put it together, dominated through. But again, we love dual meets, and I love that they are continuing to have great dual meets in the offseason. I love the junior duels and cadet duels that they have for USA Wrestling, but the Ultimate Club Duels has always been something on my radar, and I'm glad that they have this tournament because I think the dual competition is so special because when it's all said and done, you remember the relationships. The placings are nice and all the accolades, but I think these girls remember who they were with and traveling with the team. I just think it's fun, and I think that's a special part of the sport that gets under talked about.
Yeah, well, this event is actually great because I watched it a lot for the guys, and they had a team, out in New York, like a lot of like Volga Aruzzo's guys, like Vito, these guys. It would be like Con United. They'd have a team like out of New York, and you'd have just a lot of hammers. Adam Buciello, I think Ja'Cory Teamer, and this is like an all-star team, and a lot of guys from that room. But it's a good time for athletes that either competing against each other, maybe a weight up or down, or different region, but then they go together and they compete and they're on the same team and they get to see how each other practices, work out together, train a little bit. It's always good, and the dual meet format is the best. And I just say in general, like compared to when I wrestled, which was in the 70s and 80s in high school, junior high and high school, these opportunities. We did some of this stuff on a one-off. We had, Fargo was at University of Iowa, and there was no cadets. It was just juniors, and there weren't duels. You'd have some random events. You still have that, the Pitt Classic, which is a crazy event for the best of the best. But the idea that these athletes have these opportunities to compete in all these dual formats and these other tournament formats, it's just phenomenal. And that it's highly correlates to why these athletes are so good so young. They're competing, they're training with very good coaches, they have video, and they're just getting an opportunity to travel and compete against the best. When we were younger, it would be like maybe you have one tough match a year in your area, and it would be like, yeah, if you went to Fargo, Iowa City, whatever. But here, there's just constantly, good competitions. I mean, look at how much Taina Fernandez competes. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? These opportunities. So, I think, on one hand, the other side of that coin is you have to balance not burning out, not overtraining, not getting injured. And that can happen as well. So it needs to be managed carefully, especially as we talked about. I'm not convinced that, I am convinced that women's and men's bodies are different. And the wear and tear and the way that they train, there's different, and we don't know the true effects yet. Time hasn't really tested this. So, I think the women obviously can do this and handle this, but we don't know what too much is, what overtraining is. So, but it is a great opportunity for them.
One thing I'm convinced about is motivation has to come from inside, is that if you want to do it, it has to be on your terms and you have to want to do it, because if anyone outside is making you do it, it's not going to work. It has to come from you.
Well, I have some experience on that because, when we started wrestling, it was like, and I first did, Mikhail did Taekwondo and I'm a martial artist as well. And we're like, well, I didn't want her to wrestle unless she wanted to. And then she wanted to get into MMA and then started wrestling late at 13. But it was always been like, only do this or progress. And she loved it, but it's only like if you want to, because you can't do this for anybody else. The sport's so hard. And you can never, and I've said this many times, don't ever throw back in my face that I made you do this. If you don't want to do it, quit now, because it's going to be hard and it's going to go deep. And you're not doing it for me. I mean, I love that she does it and I enjoy it, but you cannot do this for anybody else. And if you don't want to do it, you shouldn't do it because it is exceptionally difficult and it's got to come from within. And the really great ones are just, they have such mental, even though we all and everybody gets nervous and you can see they're human. And, you know, you talk to Sarah Hillebrand, she'll tell you she gets nervous all the time. Nobody's not nervous. You talk to a sports psychologist, they'll all tell you you should be nervous. And that's normal. Even if you're wrestling somebody you're way better than, but you have to like the fight or you have to like the competition and want to be the best because it's so hard. And the truly best ones are just some of the most mentally tough competitive people ever because this is not a sport for mental midgets. It's just not.
To the point where I think it has to be so internal that you almost can't help it. It's a calling that you have to answer and you don't know why, but it's got to be that deep because you're right. Wrestling is a Spartan sport and it will eat you alive if you do not want to do it. It's not just shooting hoops on the court and watching a three-pointer drain.
Well, it's not a game. It's a combat sport. And that's very different. You know, and you can there's nobody to blame. You know, your teammate misses a 3-point shot, misses a pass. Oh, we didn't play well as a team. No, you're out on the mat and you could just have a bad day or lose. You could not have prepared right. Somebody could just be better than you. You could be sick. There could be a lot of reasons, but it's literally, you're putting a gladiator out in the ring and saying, kill the person, you know, within, you know, reason. But the other side of that, and we say how hard it is, and I harp on that, but I probably too much saying that, to be honest with you, maybe discouraging people. But I just want to be honest about what it entails. And I never even wrestled at the highest level, but I did it fairly, you know, involved. And I understand a little bit and I'm around it. But the beauty of the sport is it is a martial art. So it is beautiful. When you watch good wrestling, it is beautiful to watch. And it's mental. Like for everything you do, something else is potentially exposed. So when an athlete learns how to really wrestle and see what's being open, what the advantages and disadvantages, what their opponent's doing, what they take, what risks they should take and when. It's chess. It's a combat form of kind of chess. And it's so intricate. And the beauty is you could always keep getting better. And there's so much to learn. And, you know, that when we talk about, you know, an athlete should be honest and say, what do I need to work on? It really is probably most people, unless you're like a 98, is what do you need to work on? Probably everything. But you have to prioritize it and according to what is most important right now. What is losing me matches? Like, it doesn't matter how good on your feet are if you get 5 out of 6 takedowns, but the one time you get taken down, you get turned intact. So you have to prioritize, you know, what needs to be done. So it is obviously a brutal existence. It's very hard, but it's also, if you like it, it's fun. It feels good when you do well and you achieve things that you work on. And it's a gorgeous sport in some way.
And you have to do it for yourself, for the results. People will support, but the reality is if you are a true fan, you don't care if that person wins or loses. You care about that human being and who they are off the mat is far more important than any result. And I think that's important to keep in perspective, especially in a sport that's so singular. When there is a winner and a loser and you see the hand raised, you can't care about the results. You have to care about the person.
Well, yeah. And, you know, we'll go back to, you know, the trite statement that everybody says, you know, after you've wrestled, everything else is easy. And, you know, what percent of people that wrestle are truly going to be world-class wrestlers? An exceptionally small percentage. You know, we talk about them a lot because that's, you know, we're not going to talk about people nobody's ever seen or heard of. But what it does to develop the character, you know, you could have even things that, you know, without a good training partner or a workout partner, somebody may not get better, but just internally, somebody may not be great at wrestling, but can improve a lot. And in doing that, you could just see their confidence get better. And it really is not trite. It really is true. I promise you, I've worked on Wall Street. I've done hard jobs. Compared to wrestling, anything is easy. It really is true. And wrestling just pushes you in places and really does build character. And it's actually by osmosis, just being around it. I have very infrequently in my life ever seen anybody say, since they started wrestling, they become a worse person. I've just seen almost everybody you're ever exposed to develops as a human being.